look up to the sky, and if it is a full moon, or if it is a new moon, you can be sure there is a new chapter of 3 books with me, Neil Pasricha. Yes, for 333 straight new moons and full moons from 2018 all the way up to September 1st, 5:52 a.m., 2031. Yes, we're in it for the long haul, people. We are going to be asking people which 3 books most formed and shaped and inspired and changed their lives. We've talked to Judy Blume. We've talked to Seth Godin. We've talked to the world's greatest Uber driver, Vishwas Agrawal. We've talked to Chris Anderson of TED. And today I am super duper excited to share with you this incredible chapter with the one and only Mitch Albom. For those that may not know, Mitch is the author of Tuesdays with Morrie, the #1 selling memoir of all time, as well as The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, and his new book, The Next Person You Meet in Heaven. Those books have sold over 40 million copies. In addition to being a writer, Mitch just doesn't turn off, right? He's like the Tasmanian Devil. He's running a regular daily radio show. He's on TV. He's writing his columns in the Detroit Free Press. He's still writing them. He's a musician. He's running an orphanage in Haiti. And when I say he's running an orphanage, I mean, the man is running an orphanage. He's flying down there all the time. He's operating it. He's even adopted children from there. I mean, he is an extreme person, right? Like, I think he's just like, he's full of energy. He's full of life. He moves very quickly. He talks very, very, very quickly. And we talked about that because there was a part of Tuesdays with Morrie. There's a part of Tuesdays with Morrie that I actually misunderstood, and Mitch kind of corrects me, and you hear him, he's a bit sharp about it, but I think it's because he's been asked about it so many times. He's a bit frustrated, but he shares it with me, and I really appreciate him opening up to me about that. He talks a lot about what the worst thing you can say to an artist is, which is advice he received from an important and powerful conversation he had with Maya Angelou. And he also talks to me a little bit about what the true enemy of getting things done is. What the true enemy of getting things done is. Is it time? Is it energy? No, it's none of those things. Wait till you hear Mitch's take. And now, without further ado, let's fly down to Detroit, Michigan. Let's head up to the top of the Fisher Building, a 90-year-old Art Deco building in downtown Detroit, and let's sit down with the one and only Mitch Albom. Let's go. Just airplane moded myself.
Okay.
Hi, Mitch.
Hi.
We're recording.
All right.
And thanks so much for meeting me here on the 8th floor of the Fisher Building, this 90-year-old Art Deco building in Detroit. Is this where you spend a lot of time?
Well, this is where my radio show is broadcast from, and I've done it for the last 22 years. So I guess I've spent a lot of time here. Yeah.
Closing in on some of the people working there at the building. It's a beautiful building, and I got lost in the bathroom a couple times because there's like 100 toilet stalls here.
Yeah, this really goes back. It's an Albert Kahn architecture building. It's very famous in Detroit. It was once, cornerstone of a lot of activity, like a lot of things in Detroit. This used to be really a hotbed of activity. The General Motors offices were literally across the street from here, but things change, and now they're changing back. So things are getting better in Detroit.
Ah, beautiful. Well, you are officially the second member of the Rock Bottom Remainders I've had the privilege of interviewing for $3. So I appreciate that. Maybe I'll cycle my way through the band over time.
Yeah, there's a lot of them to get to. That could take you a while.
Could be the whole show.
The first one was
Dave.
Dave Barry.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you started at the top there. So.
I think he said some very kind words about you as well. And I really appreciate you talking about your 3 most formative books. So being respectful of your time, I thought we'd jump right in. And what would be your first most formative book that you'd be willing to chat with us about? And could you tell us about your relationship with that book?
So are we talking about books that, I might have read when I was younger, or books that so there's actually
I'm talking about, ignited a passion, altered a direction, changed a mood.
Yeah.
You look back and you're like, whether you like it or not today, you're like, that made me part of who I am.
So there's a book that I don't think too many people are ever going to have heard of. It was written in the 1930s. It's called The Royal Road to Romance. by Richard Halliburton. Now, Richard Halliburton was an explorer back in the 30s, back at a time when it wasn't vogue to do that kind of thing. He had gone to, I want to say like Princeton or something like that. He was a little blue-bloodish and was expected to go into the family businesses or whatever they were, and decided to break the mold and just start traveling around the world. And for a brief period of time during that decade, he wrote these books about these adventures that he took. He went all around the world. He retraced Hannibal's steps and rode on an elephant, and did that. He slept in the pool in the Taj Mahal. He climbed the Matterhorn, and did all these things that kids from that kind of background weren't supposed to do. And then he wrote stories about it, and they became very popular for a short period of time. I mean, very popular. He was the Diary of the Wimpy Kid kind of author for young people in America, particularly kids. He wrote in a fairly simple style. And then, of course, he, as would happen with a thing like this, he had a tragic ending. He tried to retrace, I think they were trying to sail across the China Sea in some little tiny boat, and he disappeared and was never heard from again. And I've always wondered why they didn't make a movie about this guy, because for a while he was just extremely popular, and then now nobody remembers him. So somebody had given me this book when I was in my early teens, and I too had been having a path of, okay, you're supposed to do this. And I grew up in a middle class family, and my dad was the first one to go to college, and I was going to be the first one to go to college, and then some kind of professional school, doctor, lawyer. You basically had two choices, doctor, lawyer. If you didn't like the blood, you could be a lawyer, but it was going to be one of those two. And reading that book was the first thing that sort of inspired me to think about travel and adventure, and then writing about your travels and your adventures. And I would go back and read it over and over again. And I'd never been to the Taj Mahal. I'd never even seen pictures of the Taj Mahal. I didn't know what mountain the Matterhorn was. And of course, these were the days before the internet. So you couldn't just go running off and go and looking at it. And it didn't have any pictures. So it was all just words. But it got me to go to the library and look up what the Matterhorn was, and look up, the Taj Mahal, and look up Hannibal, and look up all these different things. And so it really sparked adventure for me. And my life has ended up being exactly that. And so I began to travel when I was in my late teens. That was my first trip sort of over to Europe. And then I traveled while I was in college. I went all around America one summer with a friend of mine. We tried to touch all 48 contiguous states in one summer. And then I backpacked across Europe when I got out of college. And I ended up getting a job in Greece as a piano player and a singer on the island of Crete. Thus morphing my desire to be a musician, with my desire to travel. Now, this time I didn't want to be a writer at all. Writing was just, to me, something that I read. I read other people's writing, and it inspired me to do these things. But when I look back on my life now, I realize that book really kind of spawned the whole sense of, why not? Go ahead, try it, do it. You can. You don't have to follow the path that was laid out for you. And until that point, nothing had ever spoken to me that way. Everyone in my circle and my family wanted me to sort of stay the path that was kind of pre-chosen for me. And of course, my parents were never too happy when I kind of broke away. And I remember calling them and saying, I'm in Crete, and I got a job as a piano player, and I'm going to stay here. And of course, I was supposed to come back and start my life. And here I was.
Doctor or lawyer.
Yeah, doctor or lawyer. And I didn't. And it was those kinds of adventures that later informed me, even when I became a sports writer. I never followed the typical path of a sports writer. I wanted to, and I did. In my early years, I went to Russia with the Goodwill Games. I ran with the Bulls in Pamplona. I did the Iditarod, the entire 2.5 weeks of it for the newspaper. And luckily, I had a newspaper that was willing to say, okay, if you're up for doing it, we'll pay for you to go. And I wrote all these stories that were adventure travel stories as much as anything else. And it all comes back from that Royal Road to Romance. I hope I'm remembering the details of it correctly.
No.
I haven't read it in a long time, so maybe it's not the Matterhorn; it's a different mountain, or whatever. But it was all these. Yeah. It was all these things, and so I always think that the first book, when people talk about books that influenced them, I'm always hearing writers talk about these very literate novels and navel-gazing kinds of books and all around. And I'm much more practical about it. I look at it and say, well, the first book you would mention, especially in a program like yours of the three, should be something that launched you somehow on your path in life, not necessarily your writing path, because the path that you take in life becomes your writing path. You become the writer that you are destined to be by the things that you do, not the things that you write. And I began to read Hemingway and his travels in Spain and things like that, probably because of that simple Royal Road to Romance book, which opened my mind to all that. So that was the first one that really, while it didn't influence my writing style, it influenced my curiosity. It sparked my curiosity to see the world and to travel the world. And without that, I wouldn't be the writer that I ultimately became.
And not just writer, Mitch. You know, Wikipedia calls you an author, journalist, screenwriter, dramatist, radio, television broadcaster, musician, podcaster, of course. And it's like you have a thirst for the world that's just so palpable in your work. Can I get deeper into that with you? Because I know with all the work you're doing in Haiti, you mentioned you went there after the earthquake, the work you're doing with the orphanage, you are so, and you flew into this room and you're flying right out to the show. Like how does that ambition balance with the contentment you also preach in Tuesdays with Morrie and the other books? How does that thirst for adventure in life balance with the fact that we have such short lives to begin with?
Well, I mean, so that's a very good question. And I've been asked that in some kind of different form over the years. And I try to always, when people are serious about it, I say, okay, let me try to explain that some people's perception of Tuesdays with Morrie is that because Morrie got a life-ending disease, what he realized in his enlightenment and what he shared with me was that you should somehow just sit in a tree and hum all day because that's what life is about. And that could not be farther from the truth. And I don't know where somehow that rose up from Tuesdays with Morrie. I know I didn't write that.
No, of course.
But I guess, you know, the notion of slowing down, people hear about slowing down, but Morrie never encouraged me to slow down for the sake of slowing down. He encouraged me to slow down in my ambition for my own advancement. He would be more than happy and was more than happy if I spent every waking moment helping others and doing things that helped others. And that is kind of how I lead my life now. Yeah, I flew into this room because I was just down at a charity event where they're planting an urban garden. And, you know, I had to get to that before I came here. And I'll go to Haiti over the weekend. I go every month, and I've gone for the last 9 years or however long since the earthquake, I say 8.5 years. I go every single month, and I'm there for 3 or 4 days. And yeah, I'll rush to get to the airport to get down there. But it's not the rushing. It's not the movement. It's what you're doing it for. Yeah. And if you're doing it for the right reasons, for reasons of contentment, for reasons of helping other people, not to make money for the sake of making money or just advance your own legend, then the energy with which you put into it was never something that Morrie criticized and never something that I've criticized. So God blessed me with a good amount of energy. I wake up in the morning and I just get going, but I do it because I love everything that I do. The biggest blessing I have is that I never spend any time in my life slogging away at something that I really don't like. You know, at this point in this stage of my career, if I write, it's because I want to write. If I write a newspaper column, it's on a subject I want to write, not because they assigned it to me. If I do a book, it's because it's a book that I want to write, and not because it's one that has to be done in a series. And
which makes it better art, probably.
I hope.
Yeah.
But certainly more relaxed art. And of course, the charity work that I do and the different things here in the city of Detroit or whatever are all come from a desire to make things better for other people. So people should never confuse the languid pace that Tuesdays with Morrie may read at, because it is a gentle book that reads kind of slowly. And I know it's very short, and I've had a lot of people say to me, it ends so quickly. I didn't want it to end. I only read a couple pages of it at a time because I saw how short it was. Okay, I understand that, but that doesn't mean that it's wrapped up in that's how you're supposed to lead your life at a very slow pace. Nobody said that. And Morrie never said that. No. Morrie had a lot of energy when he was younger, and he did a lot of things. So energy is not the enemy. Distraction is the enemy. Yeah. And lack of important purpose is the enemy. And those things take a lot of energy to fight off, to be honest with you.
You know, Jeff Bezos said recently that work-life balance is not a scale like we picture it being a balance. It's actually a flywheel. He said the energy you get from work inspires more energy at home, inspires more energy in charity work. It's actually a flywheel. The faster it goes, the more energy you get. And you said on page 43 of Tuesdays, Morrie created a cocoon of human activity, conversation, interaction, affection. Again, a life full of energy producing.
That's right.
Flywheel almost.
For a guy who had, a disease that basically robs you of all your movement, he was pretty kinetic. And, right up to the end, he was still stirring thoughts, and he didn't do a lot of sighing and just lying there and sighing. Morrie didn't even want to lie in bed. He had an aphorism, when you're in bed, you're dead. Mm-hmm. And so he used to make people lift him out of bed. He could have done everything that he did in bed. What difference did it make to him? He wasn't moving. But just the mental thing of, no, I'm going to work. And so they would carry him from his bedroom 12 feet into the office, it was the next room down, and put him in a chair in his office. And so even with no movement and even physically robbed of the ability to do anything, he still wanted to work. Yeah. So that's why I sometimes laugh when people say, how can you work so hard or do so many things? Didn't you, read your own book? I said, not only did I read it, I wrote it. And I'm telling you that I'm the one who gets this. You're a little confused about what the idea is. So
I love that you're
hopefully that explains
I love that you're unapologetic about it, because you know what, when people look at guys like me and you and I don't know you as well, Mitch, but like I get pegged with that too. They're like, you're going too fast, you're going too hard. But actually, I love that. I flew down here today just to chat with you because I love doing that.
Why is that too fast?
It's beautiful, right? Yeah. Like we have 30,000 days. If you're lucky, let's mount.
Listen, the most inspirational thing I think that a writer ever told me was Maya Angelou. I don't profess to have a relationship with her like Oprah Winfrey or any of that. She came as a guest on my radio show here in this building on this floor or another one at the time. And she was promoting something. She came through. She was lovely. We did an interview. And when I finished and we were in the hallway, I said, can I ask you, excuse me, can I ask you a personal question? And she said, sure. I said, I do this and I do this and I do this. At the time, I didn't do this, but I did do this. And I said, and I see that, you write poetry and you write drama and you write movies and you talk and I said, has anyone ever told you to stick to one thing? And her eyes lit up and she looked at me as like she'd been waiting to answer this question forever. And she said, yes. And it is the cruelest thing you can ever say to an artist. And I said, why? Well, why is it cruel? And she said, because it's telling a bird not to fly. And I never forgot that, and I said, this is somebody I respect, and she does a multitude of things and doesn't seem to have lost her purpose or her direction or who she was. So it's not the things that you do. It's, as I said earlier, it's the distractions that you allow. I know people who do one thing only, and yet they are so misguided in their priorities. And you want to say, you're putting your energy in the wrong things, and yet they only do one thing. So what's the pride in that? So yeah, variety is fine and energy is fine. It's the purpose to which you do your things, and that's an ongoing challenge, of course, in life. But I think at this stage of my life, I've gotten a pretty good grip on what's important and what isn't, and I don't do anything in my life that I don't think is important. And probably more than half of my life now is devoted to other people and helping other people, as it should be for someone who's been as blessed in his early life as I was. It's only correct to give back in that way. And I don't use give back in that cliched way of give back. I just live it every day. That's what half of my hours of a regular day are, and as they should be.
That's beautiful, Mitch. Well, thank you for saying that your spirit of travel, adventure, of sampling life has come from The Royal Road to Romance by Richard Halliburton. Does that, in your teen years, lift up into a second formative book that you can talk to us about?
So I would say the next one that I would mention would be, and I see you brought it here, is Tom Wolfe's The Right Stuff. So I read that, I'm not sure what year that came out, but not long after it came out. I'm looking. So it came out in 1979. So I read it a few years later, and at that point, I was really starting my writing career. I was starting to write I had been a musician prior to that, and that was my real life's dream, and I never planned on writing. So I was late to the game, and I began to write probably when I was about 23. So a lot of people have been writing, they say they've been writing since they're 12 and 13. I didn't write a word until I was 23. All I did was play music. But as I've later learned, music and writing are very, very close. And the spirit that it takes to create notes and songs and passages and all that is very, very similar to writing and way more, and the rhythm with which you write. And that brings me to Tom Wolfe, because Tom Wolfe, The Right Stuff was the first of his books that I read. I've then since read every single one, and probably read every single one within the 2 years that I read The Right Stuff, because I was so enthralled, not only with Tom Wolfe's ability to view events in history and retell them with such an entertaining and unique viewpoint, but he wrote as if the words were notes on a keyboard. So you will find many passages, including in The Right Stuff, where he'll just write in italics, you know, gur, 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 ba, 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 ba. But you'll see words like that. And I'd never seen anybody do that before. And he'd write these long run-on sentences and that, you know, just kept going. And then the punchline was the last 3 or 4 words. And I was like, wow, you know, I didn't know that that's where we were going to go. I remember there's one in the very first chapter of The Right Stuff where he's talking about kind of going through in a dense part of a forest or something like that, and through the trees and through the branches and through the thing, and there he found the brains of the pilot who had crashed into these trees, and it was the splattering of his brains on the thing. And you said, whoa, you know, I didn't see that coming. So that whole ability, it was very musical to me, that you can sort of, you know, da 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 da, you know, like that. And so he opened this whole possibility of melding the music world that I had come from with the writing world that I was entering into. And ironically, in my first job as a columnist at the Fort Lauderdale News and Sun Sentinel, the boss there was critical of my writing, called me in one time and said, look, you know, you use too many italics and you use too many exclamation points. And of course, I was just channeling Tom Wolfe. I was young, and that's what you do when you're a young writer. You find somebody's style you like, and you try to kind of do it your own way. And he said, have you ever read Edwin Newman's A Civil Tongue? That's what you should read. That's how you should write. It was the antithesis of Tom Wolfe. Nothing against Edwin Newman's A Civil Tongue. And I remember him saying this to me, and in my mind, I said, I will never last at this place. And I was out of there within 6 months of that dressing down, and came to Detroit, where I've been ever since. And they celebrated the way that I wrote, and they loved the
like
different
exclamation marks.
They like italics, exclamation points. They wrote, you know, I would write articles about, you know, talking to an old glove, or you know, I wrote one about interviewing a horse at the Kentucky Derby. I always remember that because I thought I was being very clever. You know, I tried to use column writing for whatever form. I did columns of just want ads, you know, where it's just listing of want ads. I did rhymes. I did rap songs as columns. I did you know, make believe conversations between different people. And I remember I did this one about interviewing a horse, which I thought was really clever. Towards the end, as I left, the horse said, "Be careful where you're stepping. That's not second base. You're right behind you there, whatever." And some reader, but this was back in the days when they didn't file comments after your column, they sent you letters. A reader sent me a letter, and he sent my column back to me, cut out of the paper, and he just wrote on it in a marker, "A jackass talks to a horse." And I thought, that's pretty good. So I put that up on my bulletin board. Sometimes you just got to take your hat off to the critics. But you know, Tom Wolfe kind of inspired me to never see language as a limiting thing, but see it as a paint box, and that you can do anything you want with rhythm and beats and sounds. And I would, long before the now common practice of best period, day period, ever period. I was writing like that with single words and period, and so just to establish a rhythm. And it worked great for me because music is always in my head. And I'm always writing in that kind of way. And one of the nice compliments that people have paid me over the years, or at least ones that I felt was important, is when they say, you know, I've read your column and, you know, I started and I'm done with it. It's like that, you know, and other people, I read and I find I have to stop and gather myself again and then read on. I got lost in a paragraph. And I always say to them, well, that's because I write with a rhythm. And to me, I'm always sort of doing this as I go along in writing, particularly in columns, which are, you know, a set length and whatever. And if I don't hear this, if all of a sudden, like it breaks as I'm reading it, I realize there's something wrong with my sentence structure. I need to change something. I need to take some words out. I need to break it. It's not, I can't keep the beat going. You know, I always sway back and forth. My wife is always saying, oh, you must be in the middle of a good thing because you're swaying back and forth. You're right, but that's how I do it. I always have a rhythm as I read. And if I can't, the rhythm is broken, there's something the matter with the sentence.
Listeners can't see you right now. You're literally, as you're talking to me now, your head's bopping, your knees are going up and down, your hands
I do it, I guess, when I talk too.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And we almost live now in an era, I don't know if you'd agree, where like, you know, what you got from Tom Wolfe in the sort of early 80s, late 70s, it's like, has language not become like this everywhere? You look at tweets, there's, you know, people are swearing, there's exclamation marks. We live in this very loud world now. How do people still get language that penetrates today? How do we break through the clutter and the noise?
That's a challenge. I mean, that's a question for brighter minds than me, but it is a challenge. I agree with you because we have, first of all, everybody writes. Or they think they write, but they write in 140 characters. Punctuation and grammar are a thing of the past, and the lack of punctuation and grammar is celebrated, not criticized. And so how do you keep from looking staid or old or out of it, writing in traditional form? And there are a lot of new writers who write in this tweet kind of form. And
the most popular book right now in the last 2 years has been like a book called Milk and Honey by Rupi Kaur, all lowercase, lots of playfulness with its poetry, lots of playfulness with the justification, with the subtext, bylines, you know.
I mean, I'm not going to be one of those older fuddy-duddies that says, oh, these kids today. Because I'm sure somebody said that to Tom Wolfe, too. You shouldn't write like that. Too many italics, too many, you know, I had it happen to me. So anyhow, I think that every generation has its own style. Tom Wolfe was part of the, you know, new journalism, as they say, you know, along with Norman Mailer and Hunter Thompson, who certainly wrote in a strange fashion, and Joan Didion and all the rest. And Joan Didion is another one who really influenced me. And Slouching Towards Bethlehem is one of my favorite books. And the essay there, Life and Death in the Promised Land, I think is the first. I mean, I've read it a gazillion times just for the sharpness of the writing. Somebody said about Joan Didion, she writes so tightly it cuts the flesh. And I always thought, yeah, that's good. And I always tried to aspire to do that. And my faults early on were that I wrote too long, and my sentence structure was too awkward. If I made a mistake, a common mistake, that would be it. And so I set out to try to write shorter and non-awkwardly and neat. And so I've kind of gone the other way. Now my books are, you know, like 180 pages long, and everything's so short and tight. And, you know, that came also as a reaction to some of the writing.
Thank you, man. Is there a final book you want to leave us with that, you know?
Yes. So the third book, because I thought about this before when I knew I was going to talk to you, is called Gilead by Marilynne Robinson. Now, Gilead won a lot of awards, but that doesn't mean anything. You know, it doesn't mean too many people have read it. I'm so intimidated by her that I actually had the chance once to meet her, and I chickened out. We were at a writer's thing or whatever, and I was doing a speech, and I think, you know, my room had a ton of people in it, and she was on a panel with somebody, and to me it should have been the exact opposite way around. And I didn't have the guts to go up and introduce myself because I'm so in awe of this book. And she's written other ones which are good, very good, but Gilead to me, first of all, the writing is so beautiful. Tom Wolfe's writing was inspiring to me for its rhythm, and the Roy Wood romance was inspiring to me for the story. But this is just beautiful. I can open any page of Gilead and find a passage that is heartbreaking. It's the story in a simple nutshell of an old preacher who is reaching the last days of his life and is writing to his very young son. He got involved with a woman, a much younger woman, and they had this child. He realized he's not going to be there for him to raise him into his adulthood, and so he's sort of writing this farewell letter almost about what he's learned in his life and the lessons he wants to leave behind. In its own weird way, there's a little Tuesdays with Morrie-ish stuff quality to it, although it's certainly not broken down into lessons or things like that. But
it did come out after Tuesdays with Morrie.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she wasn't influenced by me. And I'm pretty sure she probably hasn't read anything I've written. But it is because he's a man of God. It speaks to a lot of things that have become important to me in the later part of my life. I also wrote a book about faith called Have a Little Faith. I've spent a lot of my time, as you've noted, with this orphanage in Haiti. It's a Christian orphanage, and I'm not Christian myself, but I mean the faith element of their lives in Haiti and of these orphans and of the poor people is very important to me. And I've become a much more spiritual person as I've gotten older. And so to read a character who can speak so beautifully about life, but mixes in, God and isn't ashamed of it. I don't even know if today, people would be critical of Gilead because it is based on, a preacher's view of the world. But I just think it's gorgeous. And it showed me that there is something you can always aspire to in your writing, and that is beauty. Once you find purpose, once you find style, and I think I've done all that, what's left is beauty. And you're never going to reach the end of that path. You can keep trying to write in a way that's more beautiful. And as I've gotten older, I think I've been blessed to do that. Now, I'm nowhere near on her level or many other writers' level, so it's all relative. But relative to the way I wrote when I was younger, I'm learning how to say things in succinct and more beautiful fashion. There's a passage where I wish I had the page in front of me, but he basically is just describing. He's describing a young couple laughing underneath a tree where the raindrops are coming off of the tree, and how beautiful the sound of laughter is. And at the end of the paragraph, it's just beautiful, descriptive. He just says something like, "Oh, comma, this life, this world." So simple. And yet, you feel, here's this old man looking back. And as I get older, that's how I feel about the world. Just, oh, this world, this life. It astonishes me. There's so much beauty in it and so many things that with children and particularly, and because that book is written to a child, and I've had a lot of contact with children in my later years, and they've become more and more part of my life running this orphanage. And we had a child that one of the kids we brought up became our daughter for several years. She died of a brain tumor, but the 2 years that we had her living with us as our little girl were the most formative and significant years of my life. And so much of her joy and spirit, her name was Chica. I'm going to do a book about her next after the one that comes out this year. And I found myself always with her saying, oh, this world, this life, oh, this child. And she was just here for 7 years on earth, and, she died so young. So that book, Gilead, not only when I first read it, but every time I continue to read it, shows me the possibilities of writing. And if I could ever create a page that to me is as beautiful as this book, I would be happy. And so, the Roy Road to Romance kind of launched me into, a view of the world, and the right stuff. And Tom Wolfe's writing sort of gave me tools to write. And this gives me something to shoot for always in my life in terms of beauty. I got to go.
Thank you so much, Mitch, for your time today. And thank you for sharing with us your three most formative books.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, this life, this world. Beautiful words shared by Mitch Albom on this incredible discussion down in the Fisher Building in Detroit, Michigan. It is just me, it is just Neil again. As Mitch says, once you find purpose and once you find style, what's left is beauty. And I love that. What an incredible metaphor for so many things in life. Once you find purpose and once you find style, what's left is beauty. Well, it seems to me that Mitch Albom is really touching and hitting on and stretching out his vision of what beauty can be in the world right now. And it was a real honor and privilege sitting down with him and hearing how he continues to be so inspired and so engaged and so energetic, giving so much of himself to the world. Thank you to Mitch Albom for giving us number 960, The Royal Road to Romance by Richard Halliburton, number 959, The Right Stuff by Tom Wolfe, and number 958, Gilead by Marilyn Robinson. Brief pause while I remembered what the third book was for a second there. Gilead, he talked about it for so long. What was it called again? It was called Gilead, people. Thank you so much to Mitch. Thank you so much to you. Thank you so much for continuing our quest to uncover the 1,000 most formative books in the world. I will see you on the next new moon. And now, if you've made it to this far in the podcast, I'd like to welcome you back into the end of the podcast club. This is one of two clubs that we have for 3 Books listeners. The other one is a secret club, so I can't say anything more about that. You have to keep listening to figure out the clues to joining. But for now, we are in the end of the podcast club, people. I'd love to hear from you. Give me a call at 1-833-READ-A-LOT. And now let's go to the phones.
Hey, Neil, it's Laura Gassner-Otting, and I think this is super cool. And I wanted to say my formative book was The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, which I read when I was in 11th grade as a young Reagan Republican in Miami, Florida. And that book turned me into a Democrat. And I went from there and ended up working in the Clinton White House, helping create a national community service program that helped people to level the playing ground and have access to college tuition that they wouldn't normally have by serving their communities and making the world a better place. So that's my story about a formative book.
Laura, thank you so much for the call. What a perfect call. Just call, leave us a book. Leave us a book. We love books. We're crazy about books. Leave us a book. The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, published in 1904. Sinclair wrote the novel to portray the harsh conditions and exploited lives of immigrants in the United States, in Chicago and similar industrialized cities. Thank you so much, Laura. It turned you from a Republican into a Democrat. Just think of what it could do for any of us. Thank you so much to Laura. And now let's go to the review of the podcast. And this chapter's review comes from Elegant Warrior, who says, "Books without ego. I love this podcast, but what compelled me to write a podcast is that Neil has no ego. He doesn't want anyone to have book shame, and he doesn't allow anyone to have intellect shame because he asks the questions we are all thinking. Thank you. I just wish the moon moved a little faster." You are welcome, Elegant Warrior. And as always with the review of the chapter, just email us. Our email contact info is at 3books.co, 3books.co, which is where our transcripts and show notes and values, everything's there. Email us and we send you a free autographed copy of any of my books, okay? To anywhere in the world. It doesn't matter if you're in Korea. We have no North American bias. You can be in Guam. You can be on an island. We will mail you a book. And as for the intellect shame and that kind of stuff, you know what? I appreciate that. I'm just really ignorant about a million things. So that's probably why you're hearing so many questions. I hope it doesn't bother people. I'm glad that it works for you. I'm always worried myself, though, that I'm like, am I the only one that doesn't know what that means? Who knows? But that's partly why I get to have fun with this show, right? So now what's left in the end of the podcast club? Just one thing, people. You know what it is? It is the word of the chapter. It's the word of the chapter. And Mitch Albom is a very literate guy, obviously. He's an author. So what are some of the words he used? He used a lot of words. He used a lot of interesting words. Contiguous, languid, aphorism. But the word I picked out is actually blue-bloodish. Let's hear Mitch describe it.
He had gone to, I want to say like Princeton or something like that. He was a little blue-bloodish. and was expected to go into the family business.
Now, you may know that blue blood is a noun defined by Merriam-Webster as having membership in a noble or socially prominent family. But the thing you may not know, and the thing I didn't know, is where did that come from? Why blue blood? What does blue blood even mean? Well, I looked it up. There's a lot of research done about this. Apparently, it's really, really old, as you might not be surprised. And there's 3 reasons that people of kind of noble backgrounds were kind of seen to have blue blood. Number 1 is they are totally incestuous. So apparently they have a really rare blood type, something that only less than 0.5% of the population has. And in that blood type, with that blood type, which is called RH, like an RH blood type with an O prominence, there's more copper in their blood. So their skin looks blue through their skin because of this blood type. The second reason is because for a long time, they used a lot of silver. Their cups, their glasses, their dishes, all that stuff made of silver. That was super fancy back then, but it also leads to having bluer looking skin and veins. Okay, and the third reason that people of kind of the noble class or upper prominent elites are considered blue bloods is because they don't do much manual work. So they're, for hundreds of years, it's like their hands weren't all calloused. Their skin was fairer and whiter and lighter, and you could, of course, see things like veins and blue blood, or blood that looks blue, through their skin. That's why I picked up blue bloodish, because yeah, you might have heard of a blue blood, or at least I had, but I'm like, what is that? Like, where did that even come from? And thank you to Mitch for kind of leading me down a huge rabbit hole to research why we call people of a noble or socially prominent background blue bloods. Because their blood looks blue. Because they're incestuous, silver-eating people. And so we've come to the end of chapter 15. We are 15 chapters in, people. Don't abandon me now, okay? Well, there's only, let me see if I can do the math, 318 left. Okay, we got a long way to go. But I am having so much fun with this. I am feeling your love. I am feeling your connection and your energy. We are getting fantastically interesting guests. I love hearing from you. Anytime, please feel free. It's 1-833-READ-A-LOT to phone me. Of course, our email addresses are all on 3books.co. And if you leave a review, we'd love to pick one out every single chapter to be our review of the chapter. Until next time, remember that you are what you eat and you are what you read. Thanks so much for joining us.